How many other films did you make whilst you were making?
I think I made about, 9 other films.
Oh, shame on us.
In the 12 years.
Reese said part of the reason why she wanted you was because she felt like you would really hold her feet to the fire.
And the cold water, the ice, naked by bed. And
Theoretical physics, which is not really a very user-friendly topic for a dramatic film.
Box office gold. But there's nothing like a year of misery in a dark room.
Yeah, see, I don't see that.
Now I'm trying to show off at all times as much as humanly possible.
I'm Richard Linklater. I wrote, produced, and directed Boyhood.
How was your week? You know, who do you hang out with? Do you have a girlfriend? What have you been up to?
I see your point.
I'm Bennett Miller. I made Foxcatcher.
I'm a little concerned that there are some psychological issues that we need to take care of.
I'm Jean-Marc Vallee. I'm the director of Boyhood.
I have only another 300 miles left to walk. I'm desperate for it to be over, but I'm terrified too.
I'm James Marsh, and I directed The Theory of Everything.
You don't know what's coming. It'll affect everything.
I'm J.C. Chandor, the writer and director of A Most Violent Year.
You will never do anything as hard as staring someone straight in the eye and telling the truth.
Richard, we'll start with you. I want to ask you about the casting of Boyhood. I mean, what was it? The project just in itself is so ambitious. How was it that you decided on the people that you wanted to spend 12 years with?
That's a good question.
Yikes.
That was a daunting casting choice for sure. Casting's tough enough as it is, but to be looking at a 6-year-old going like, okay, who are you going to grow up to be? You know, are you going to be cool? Are you going to be one of those kids? You know, who are you going to be? So I always joke that it's kind of like picking the Dalai Lama. You know, like the next, you know. So, but
What if he had become like a jock or something?
I made a choice. I could tell as a kid he was a kind of a dreamer, thoughtful. His parents are both artists, but I met a lot of jock kids, so I really made a choice. You know, I was like, I'll go with the kid who seems like the artist, because that'll be like the better side of a
Patricia Arquette, you'd only met once before you cast her. What was it about her that made you make that decision?
I just liked her. I think she's really wonderful. I'd met her once, kind of briefly, at a reception, but I knew she had had a kid very young, like when she was about 20. So she was a single mom, and I thought that was really important. But I just called her up, kind of out of the blue, and we talked for a couple hours. And she just jumped in. Yeah, I'll do it. You know, made a 12-year commitment on one phone call.
Is that literally, was the contract, like, they signed a 12-year?
There are no contracts.
It was just...
Yeah, I found this out, but did you know you can't contract anyone to do anything over 7 years? Right. That's why all the TV actors have 7 years and then they...
Wow.
Yeah, and especially kid. You can't really contract a kid to do anything.
Did you have kids at the time, yourself?
Yeah, that's what kind of motivated it.
How were your children?
My daughter, well, she's
in the movie.
Yeah, she was 9 when we started, but when I started thinking about the movie, she was about 6 or 7 when I was like, okay, this is dredging up a lot of childhood and parenthood issues and things in myself, so I suddenly had the desire to try to make a film about those years. But
So you wrote the script and you didn't change anything to adapt it to the casting when he grew up?
Oh, no, very much. Every year I would...
Okay, you were adapting the dialogues into what he was becoming.
I would have predicted, his dad's a very good musician, I would have predicted he would have grown up and been in a band or a musician, but he really grew up with an interest in visual art, photography, so I kind of went that way. So I was always, you know, it was a great opportunity to have a year in between shoots to kind of feel my way through the material.
But did you have a first draft of the entire thing before you
I had an outline.
How many other films did you make whilst you were making...
I think I made about, 9 other films.
Oh, shame on us.
In the 12 years. Really? It was a busy time.
Wow.
But it was always tough to get, I would sometimes go from our shoot right into pre-production, or I'd be in post on something, and it was always tough to get Ethan, Patricia, my own schedule. So it was a fun 12 years, but it was always fun to have this one gestating, you know. You go through the world, when you're making a film, you know, everything, if you're writing, everything filters into that. So I had 12 years of that, like, oh, maybe that could go into that movie. Anything to do with parenting or growing up, any memory I had. I get to spend a year thinking, okay, 6th grade, what was that like? Or age 12, I had full year to just kind of gestated. It was, I'll never get that working methodology quite again like that, but it was cool.
James, what was your casting process like? Did you audition Eddie Redmayne?
No, I met him and he got drunk, and that felt like a good. I mean, in other words, he wasn't filtering himself, and it was the afternoon, and we spent 4 hours talking about what this was going to entail, and based on that meeting, I cast him straight away. He wasn't very well known at this point. He wasn't unknown, but he certainly hadn't done much screen work, and so I went on my instinct about what I could get on with him. He was very scared of what was going to entail, and approached it with the right amount of fear. Hence the drinking, I think, as we met. So that was the process. With Felicity, I knew her already and was keen to work with her. And then we did a little kind of, I filmed a few scenes with them together to show the producers how well it was going to work, and that's how it came to be.
When we had Eddie here, he told us that he signed on before he really believed he could do it. So how do you help an actor gain the confidence to perform
Well, he knew
like this?
what it was going to entail. The preparation was going to be daily. There was going to be, good days and bad days. And I think that fear that he had was what motivated him to do all the work that he had to do. So in that respect, we chose very well.
Wouldn't that be nice, Professor? The one simple, elegant equation to explain everything.
Yes, it would. It would indeed.
And now, Bennett, you sort of oversaw a different kind of transformation with your casting of Steve Carell, a much beloved persona, and you decided to cast him in this kind of creepy, odd character. It's John DuPont. What was it that you saw in him that made you see that character in him?
Well, nobody expected John DuPont to murder anybody, so it made some kind of sense to put somebody in there who you don't expect is going to do what he did. But also, when I met Steve, he said that he's only ever played characters with mushy centers, and that DuPont seems to have a mushy center, but he doesn't. And in fact, he's dangerous. And I'm attracted to, comedic actors doing dramatic roles, because we all suspect that they've got some kind of, dark side.
Of course, yeah.
And the way he described it to me, when he's saying, look, this is not like something I've done before, he just exhibited an understanding and a seriousness, and I began to envision what that turn would feel like when he goes from an innocuous, hapless poser into something that is dangerous. Also, comedic actors, I just think, listen. He comes from an improvisational background. And even though you might think, and he might think, that the work that he's done is kind of like loose or sloppy or fun, I actually have always thought he was a very, very specific actor. And I think I've always thought he did something like extra special. And you want to see actors do that. You want to see actors surprise you like that.
Mm-hmm. And I have a deep love for the sport of wrestling. And I wanted to speak with you about your future, about what you hope to achieve. What do you hope to achieve, Mark?
Jean-Marc, you had kind of a different situation in that Reese Witherspoon was already attached to the film, producing it when you came on as a director. How does that affect your dynamic with an actor?
Yeah, I didn't cast Reese. Reese casted me. I'm the chosen one. I didn't choose her. She chose me. And I feel fortunate, you know, I feel blessed, you know, to be part of this project, and it didn't affect anything at all. She knew, you know, she's a professional actress, and she knew she has a great partner, Bruna Papandrea, in her company that she just created with her, and we were with Fox, so she knew she was well surrounded as a producer, and she trusted me, and then she focused on her acting job, and she loved the material so much, and she was so devoted to it, and got out of her comfort zone and did it.
Oh my God. What have I done?
I'm sorry you have to walk 1,000 miles just to...
Finish that sentence. Why do I have to walk 1,000 miles? I miss you. God, I miss you. My mother was the love of my life.
Come back! You're using heroin, and you're having sex with anyone who asks.
Reese said part of the reason why she wanted you was because she felt like you would really hold her feet to the fire. Did you?
And the cold water, the ice, naked by the bed, and yeah, well, I think so, yeah. She saw something in Dallas Buyers Club that was raw, that felt good for Wild, and when I read the book and the script, I said, yeah, okay, yeah, I get it, and I loved the project as much as she did, and we were on the same page. And it was some sort of the same approach, you know, and it wasn't, you know, the thing is to just try to capture and not try to stage and interfere too much as a director and the crew and everyone, and that's why, you know, we shot the film without lighting, you know, and no tracks and no dollies, and try not to show off and try not to create a style, but just capture what we have in reality, and putting the actors in a space where they can move and they can go everywhere, and you're there and you're trying to make yourself very tiny and small, and so it puts them in a place, in a zone where they feel free. They feel like, oh, this is I loved it. I don't have to hit a mark or feel the heat of a spot, to, you know, and it's organic, and it's not perfect, and it's, you know, so.
JC, you're nodding as Jean-Marc was talking. Is that something that you think about as well?
No, I'm trying to show off at all times as much as humanly possible. But it is something I admire about his films. I mean, they're beautifully alive. You know, they're alive.
JC, we were talking about casting. I know in A Most Violent Year you had an actor fall out, and then Oscar Isaac came in to take the role. Can you tell us a little bit about that? How that happened?
I was writing. It wasn't really a fallout. It was I was writing it while talking to an actor about it. So it was with Javier Bardem, and so it was sort of a mistake looking back on it. I was kind of selling him on the character as I was writing it, and so when it was actually done, I had kind of created this idea in his head that was different than what I had actually written. We both looked at each other at the end of it and realized probably wasn't the right person to play that part. And Jessica Chastain had been attached through that whole period. She started pitching me about her classmate, you know, from Juilliard, who they went to school together. And, you know, she's like, there's this guy, his mom is, you know, Guatemalan, his dad is Cuban, he grew up in Miami, he got himself into Juilliard, which is a lot of these kind of very American kind of immigrant traits that come through in this character. And the two of them had, you know, so the first time I saw them together was actually at Cannes. He was there with the Coen Brothers movie, and suddenly we thought we maybe could get the film financed, potentially with him involved. And then I saw them together for the first time, and they sort of had this wonderful kind of physical, it's almost like a competitive nature, because they're, you know, acting students going from way back when, so there's this great familiarity and sort of love for each other. And I don't think they had, well, I don't know. There was a wonderful sort of energy.
Where did you get that?
Your youngest daughter found it in the bushes outside her front door. She was playing with it. Look, it's loaded, with the safety off. It wasn't some kid looking to take our TV.
I'll take care of it.
Bennett, you first got interested in Channing Tatum long before most of the rest of the world knew of him, after you saw him in A Guide to Recognizing Your Saints. What was it that you liked about him?
I mean, have you seen that film? He's just, he's like an animal. And I think it might have been his first film. It's the first time I'd ever seen him or heard of him. And so people say, oh, you're Channing Tatum, doing such a totally different thing. But that first film made, this deep impression. And that's, whatever else he did, it was really Guide to Recognizing Your Saints that convinced me. And once I saw it, like, that was it. And that was 8 years ago.
And now, Richard, in casting your daughter, my understanding is they reached a point where she wanted out of the project. And it's
very briefly. I think she was having a bad year or something. Well, I didn't really cast her. She cast herself in the movie. She let it be known when she found out there was a part for the older sister about her age. Yeah, it made my life a lot easier working with her. She wouldn't have liked it if I cast someone else.
Goodbye, yard. Goodbye, crepe myrtle. Goodbye, mailbox. Goodbye, box of stuff Mommy won't let us take with us, but we don't want to throw away. Goodbye, house. I'll never like Mommy as much for making us move.
Samantha, why don't you say goodbye to that little horse attitude, okay? Because we're not taking that in the car.
Had she acted before?
Yeah, she'd kind of grown up on movie sets.
Right.
She'd been in another movie of mine, so she just, oh, that's my part. I was like, great.
But she wanted you to kill off her character?
She just asked really nicely one year, can my character, like, die? But it was fleeting. She was going through that awkward, 13 maybe, 12.
James, in shooting your film out of sequence, it placed tremendous demands on Eddie Redmayne. How did you guys think about how to do that?
We had no choice. It's about resources. And on the first day of filming, Eddie had to do 2 scenes on 2 sticks, 1 scene on 1 stick, 3 scenes able-bodied, and 1 scene in a wheelchair within the first day. And so basically, the assumption I was making was that he'd internalized all this. He had this elaborate chart he'd made, handwritten chart, where each scene had been worked out for the physicality, which I had and he had. So we were able to keep it kind of honest together that way. But that's really a tribute to him, not to me, that he was able to do that from the get-go. And every day that was the same, pretty much. When we were on a set, it was different. When we were shooting in the studio, it became more chronological. But basically, the first week, when we were shooting on location in Cambridge, that's all he was doing, was flipping from these various stages of the illness. So that's a tribute to his abilities rather than mine. And my job, I think, a lot of the time with Eddie was to support him and make him feel confident about what he was doing and not get in his way. That's sort of the way I have with actors, is to, if you cast properly, then you're interested in what their ideas are, and you create a space for them on set that's kind of sacred for them to, to offer those ideas. And so it proved with Eddie and Felicity, and if you've chosen well, you keep out of their way and let them get on with it.
Had you rehearsed a lot?
Yeah, we did a lot of rehearsals with the DP so that we can understand how to shoot. A wheelchair's odd because it puts that character on a different level all the way through. So I guess, the achievements of the actors are really theirs. And he was here telling you about them earlier on, I think.
Well, one thing he told us that was really helpful for him was that you let him see dailies.
Yes,
is that something you always do with actors?
I think you have to be quite careful about that. Younger actors seem to want to see them. Older actors don't seem to be interested, from my experience. The younger actors are so used to seeing themselves in different parts of their life on camera. But I had no problem in his case because he was serious about this. It wasn't just vanity or to say the camera angle's wrong. It was to examine the details of his performance and make sure they passed his test. And if they passed his test, they were going to pass the film's test, I guess. So usually you would be not wary of that, but you want to understand why that process was important to the actor. In this case, it felt like another asset that he could use to make the performance what it was. And so I had no problem with him going to the monitor and playing things back, and was there with him most of the time, examining the physicality, because the whole point of the film was that that had to be a given, and the emotional life of the character had to emerge from this foundation. And so that was more important than the physicality to me, and to him too, but the physicality had to be there in a detailed way for us to be able to make the character credible.
And JC, do you like to let your actors watch the dailies?
I don't think they do. It's certainly not something, no. I mean, I don't have a problem. I've certainly shown scenes. Once I have a scene cut together, I've shared that on the Redford movie. I did it just so he knew we were actually making a movie, because it was so weird. I think at some point he wasn't sure if the whole thing wasn't some elaborate, you know, joke or something that he was just being dragged through. So on the last day of shooting, he finally let me show him something. But he hadn't seen a frame or even walked by a monitor of the whole thing until that last day. But I'm certainly totally open to it. I think I don't really watch dailies, as weird as that sounds.
But you should know that I have always taken the path that is most right. The result is never in question for me. Just what path do you take to get there?
I was listening to an old interview with Mike Nichols recently where he said that being a director feels to him like being a dad. He feels a lot of paternal responsibility on set. And I wonder, Bennett, is that something you ever feel when you're working with actors?
I don't know. I think I feel one way, and then I get reports back that I'm another way, you know. I feel like a dad. You know, but,
well, we had Steve Carell here, and he spoke about how his scene with Vanessa Redgrave, before shooting the scene, you just walked up to him and said, "She's going to eat you alive," and walked away, and he was terrified and discombobulated. And as a director, why do you say that to your actor before the scene?
I mean, it wasn't exactly like that. It was I think I said she. Yeah, like she can eat you alive, something like that. It's different. There were a few moments when it might have served the scene and the dynamic to, you know, remind him that he's Steve Carell and she's Vanessa Redgrave, because that's essentially the dynamic of the scene. You know, that he is in a room with somebody with a huge power differential, and as much as he's trying to hold his own, you know, there's an insecurity there. But I rarely do things like that, you know.
Well, Jean-Marc, I mean, you recently directed 2 actors to Oscars, Matthew McConaughey and Jared Leto in Dallas Buyers Club. Do you have sort of tricks that you, or techniques that you use with every actor, or do you really have to find actor to actor kind of how to communicate and how to work with them?
No, I don't have techniques or tricks, or I know I have my own thing, which is my personality and how I am, and how I feel things. I think I'm like them. I'm like actors, very instinctive. And I can relate to them, and I can relate, you know, they feel it, you know, when it's the right take, and they look at you and they have a smile or something, and then you have the smile, I know, let's move on, and yeah, it's, you know, so it's there's no trick, no, and it's like James was saying, you know, when you cast when you have the right actors, it flows, it goes, it's an easy thing down on the set, and it's creating a nice environment and complicity and being human and loving actors and aiming for that.
Yeah, I don't think it's a family analogy. People ask Dad. I think it's more like, I would jump to sports and say head coach. You're all there voluntarily. Families, you're sort of stuck with each other, and there's all these other dynamics and agendas, and you're often going different directions with baggage from the past. What's great about every film is you're there for one reason, to kind of maximize this story you're trying to tell. So it's kind of wonderful.
Sport or military.
Yeah.
Well, but that's what's so interesting is sitting with all of you here, you seem like amiable, relaxed guys, and the idea, the public idea of a director, I think, is like a general, as Jean-Marc said. I mean, is that just a false idea, or are you totally different on the set? James, what about you?
I'm sure directors come in all different personalities.
Yeah.
I mean, you can be an alpha male and very sort of dominating on a set, and I've seen other directors work that way, not very many. Or you can be quiet and reserved, as I am, and do things on a one-on-one basis. I think, you know, collaboration is the essence of what I do, and I think what we all do. And the idea of being someone's dad is like a horrifying notion to me. Someone calling me dad would be just I'd stop my career at that point if someone called me dad on a set. It's not about that. As you say, you don't choose your family, you do choose your collaborators. And what you're trying to do, I think, is be a conduit for other people's creativity, often as well as your own. And that feels to be part of the job that I do. And I know nothing about acting, so that's the only thing I say to actors when I cast them. I know nothing about acting. You go on your own, really. I can help you, I can support you, I can encourage you, but I'm not going to micromanage how you read the lines. I can't do that. Some directors do, I'm sure. Maybe you guys do. But I wouldn't want to do that. So I'd feel like I'd miscast the person if that was what they wanted me to do for them. I think it's important to give people the opportunity to fail as well.
I mean, they're all getting paid, right? So they're showing
more than we are.
But even the crew. I mean, the general part that you're sort of imagining is more the vision, right? So those people do. If no one knows what we're doing, right, that's a problem. You know, so I think as long but you can show that you know the story you're trying to tell, and you're knowing how you're collecting every day. You're collecting more moments to try and tell that story. So no matter how you're communicating that to all the people that are in the room that are working on that undertaking, like that's the mission, really, right? Is like you want to have everyone be somewhat confident that somebody knows, you know, and then you let it happen, right?
The cutting room is where it's your domain. You've done all this. I think I know that I want to get there, and you do everything you can to get all these raw materials, but actually you have total control in the cutting room. I even cut the film myself, physically. So that's when you know that you're the director. That's when you really are in charge. The rest of the time you're pretending, you know, somewhat, and you know that once you're there, that's when the film is constructed and the performances are constructed in the cutting room as well. You're offered so much by great actors, but in fact, your job is to do right by those offerings, and that's when the cutting room, I think, for most of directors, is the safest and happiest place.
Jean-Marc, I know you said,
but I relate to what she says, and I think I do become someone else when I shoot. I mean, I'm the same person and same qualities and flaws, but with the pressure of the shooting, with this shooting Dallas in 25 days, at least I had 35 on Wild, and same on Demolition.
You can't have insecurities,
with
that's for
this
sure.
thing, and I become, I don't know, I know there's some Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, you know, and Jekyll is more on the set than in life.
That works for you?
I think so.
Well, obviously it works for you.
Well,
he's never worked with the same people twice. But
Torpedo.
Yeah, I know. I'm just teasing.
Bennett, I read you said in an article that you're constitutionally incapable of raising your voice. Is that really true?
Well, I probably could for a few seconds, and then I would lose it.
Yeah.
But now when we had Mark Ruffalo here, he was saying how that he'd seen an earlier cut of Foxcatcher that was much different from the film that sort of we know now. Do you also feel that you sort of really find the film in the cutting room?
Yeah, for sure. I've never done anything that I haven't, you know, blown up and rebuilt a number of times. And you know, what you were saying, that films are made in the edit. That is where films are made, and it is marshaling the gatherings, and but that is where it is composed. That is where the film is made. It really is working to get to the edit.
My favorite phase, though, is rehearsal and shooting. I know it's the most fraught, but to me, that's when I feel most really alive. Like you're making decisions there. I mean, sure, you control the editing, and life gets a lot calmer. But there's something about the alchemy, that's happening when it's coming alive.
It's fun, but there's nothing like a year of misery in a dark room.
Yeah, see, I don't see that.
I like this switch, going from being alone with the writing, and then the activity and the action with the shooting, and then alone with the editing.
Gets quiet again.
And then the promotion, you meet a lot of people, and then back to, it's nice to have the. You guys rehearse a lot.
Different notes.
Because I don't
rehearse a lot. I try to
really.
Weeks sometimes.
Yeah. Really.
Cool. Where you meet like old-fashioned, you just meet in a room and everyone gets here.
It's like therapy. We sit around and we talk. We read through it. And if I don't have anything to say, well, let's just read through it again. And I answer all questions. I just try to drag them through my process.
And then you go to lunch and stuff, or do you talk about it at lunch?
Sometimes, yeah.
Stop playing.
Sometimes into the night. It just depends. It depends on the movie.
No, I'm serious.
And what.
I've never been able to have a rehearsal.
I just finished shooting a big ensemble. I had 12 young actors, young guys, early 20s, and we sat around for several weeks and just hashed it out and just came up with. I find a lot of more humor too. Like, it's continuing to write. A lot of that time isn't really. It's not Stanislavski acting lesson. It's really rewriting and perfecting and finding new beats, and I find a lot of humor and have new ideas based on, okay, I have a new person.
Right.
It's becoming something a little different than I imagined based on who I've cast,
It's funny how I use the audition process to see, to hear the lines for the first time.
Well,
and then, whoops, you meet with the other actor. Let's change this. Let's do it this way. And then at the end of the casting auditions, like 3, 4, 5 weeks later, whoops, okay, we're changing this.
Not to be harsh, but there's nothing like hearing a not so great actor say your lines, and it's like kind of intense sometimes.
Yeah,
do you then rewrite based off
You're like,
what are we doing?
Rewriting in the audition.
I won't even say a not so great actor, but an actor that's wrong for something, trying to say a line, and they're in the room, it's awkward, it's like all right there, and you're hearing it's really, when you think about it, actually, the auditions is sometimes the first time you're hearing your own writing getting spit back at you.
That can be so bad. I've auditioned people with lines not from the movie. I'm trying to make like another movie or a play or something. I just want to see what they can do.
because I get embarrassed,
I don't want to hear
You're
them.
sitting there and it's like the whole, that's why I have that problem with rehearsals. I'll get embarrassed by my own writing in the rehearsal process, because you don't have the benefit of like the set and the this and the that and the fancy lighting and everything else, and so it's like your writing is definitely
But that's where I try to enlist the actor and say, hey, this writing is pretty bad. I did it myself, and if we do this, it's going to suck. So I tried, and even if they help rewrite a few lines, they really feel like they own that character. That's been my experience. And then they feel like, hey, I co-did, sometimes they'll go, I wrote my whole part, which is never really true. But if they want to think that way, that's fine, because that's, to me, they feel like they are that character. I put a lot of, at that point, I've put a lot of confidence in them.
I rehearse on the set, and I shoot the rehearsals. And it becomes take one when it's great.
Yeah.
Often.
Do they know you're shooting?
Yeah, of course.
But you call it a rehearsal?
Yeah.
Let's shoot
rehearsal
the rehearsal.
one. Are we shoot? Yeah, okay, let's shoot it.
Open up. Yeah, exactly. If you open up this way so I can see your profile a little bit. Look, Chris, I'm going to seize this opportunity to see you walk in this beautiful light towards camera, exiting frame, and the opposite around.
I know there seem to be, in some sense, kind of two schools of thought, maybe, as far as like how many takes to shoot. There's the sort of Clint Eastwood style of 1 or 2 takes, and then it goes on to more of a sort of now a David Fincher style of many, many dozens, or even
I never do that.
You don't do that. How come?
Kubrick, 120 opening a door.
James, what about you?
I like to get things, and as someone mentioned earlier on, that the actor normally knows when they're giving you something that they value, and often that's the thing that you're going to value too. They kind of give you what they've got, and then you have to go through about 25 more takes to get somewhere else. And we never have time to do that.
Yeah.
And it feels a bit cruel to do it too. Yeah. But if they've done 6, 7 and they're happy and I'm happy, then it seems pointless on the kind of schedules we work under to keep going and going and going.
And Bennett, do you have an ideal number of takes?
No rules.
Yeah.
You know, the least I did on Foxcatcher was 1 take, and the most, I don't know, maybe 40.
And was that coming from the actors that they wanted, or you needed
No,
something?
I wanted it, but just, yeah, I mean, sometimes you just struggle.
Some directors have OCD, too. That somewhere on the spectrum.
If you're,
Yeah, you need to get
just
bored with it.
keep doing it over and over.
You know, if you're shooting
That was
available
Kubrick, I
light
think.
and it's sunset, and
Yeah.
you decide to go for it, and you got 20 minutes, and you got 2 actors, so you do your coverage, you start shooting, and then in 20 minutes it's done, and it's 1 or 2 takes, and that's it. And like Reese with this character Jimmy Carter in Wild, where she's hitchhiking, and this guy stops, you know, and he says, "Hi, I'm Jimmy Carter, no relation." He's African American, and it was shot in 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes.
That's the "I'm not a hobo" scene?
Yeah.
So, how long have you been out on the road?
I'm not on the road. I'm hiking the Pacific Crest Trail. I just had to bypass a chunk of it because there was a snowfall this year.
Okay, so if you're not a hobo, where do you live?
I'm between places right now. I'm probably gonna live in Portland when I get off the PCT.
Bennett, I think it's so funny how this movie came to you in the first place, with a gentleman walking up to you at a DVD signing with some clippings.
yeah.
How did you go from that to making the film?
Well, I'm going to walk you through the entire thing.
The fact that it was a DVD.
I mean, was that, do you normally entertain
it's someone you
pitches
didn't
that-
know.
No, someone I didn't know. No, I was, so after Capote came out, Lionsgate released my first film, a documentary, The Cruise, on DVD, now available on Amazon or Apple
Great
TV.
movie, by the way.
Thank you, Rick. So they said, would you do like a DVD signing at Tower Video on Lafayette Street in New York? And somebody came to this event. I mean, 11 people probably came to this event, and one of them was a guy who had an envelope that had information about this story, including, you know, newspaper clippings. And he handed it to me and said, "I think you're going to find this story interesting. You're going to want to make this into a film." And he was right. And it was a process of becoming intrigued and researching it, getting some rights, you know.
But what in those clippings spoke to you?
You know,
did you open them right away?
No, it took about a month. I mean, I was like, okay,
yeah.
Someone just handed me a book the other day. I was like, I left it in
stuff, and then it's like, am I going to open it?
Well, it was like a month later. I'm throwing stuff out, and I'm like, what is this? I was like, oh, that guy, that thing, and you know, and you know, there was just something about it. I mean, you'd think that I'd know how to talk about it at this point, because I mean, I've been asked that question, like, what is it about it? But it's a little bit related to The Cruise, you know, and the other things I've done, which is that you know, it's people in worlds where they don't really fit, eccentric characters with big ambitions meant to remedy, you know, their problems. And these two worlds mixing, you know, one of the wealthiest guys in America with this old American money, you know, what happens behind those gates, I find interesting, and wrestling. And that these two things came together is the material of what could have been a comedy, you know. But it ended tragically, and I wanted to know. And everything that was available was cursory. It was, you know, the news trucks raced down there, did a couple of days, and then when they had the trial, there was the reporting on that stuff. But I wanted to know, like, who were these people, and who were they to each other, and what did they want, and what was the transaction, and you know, I was just sucked in.
Well, my question is, did he get producer credit or associate? The guy who gave you the article?
Yes.
He did. I met him at Telluride.
It's the best way to get in the film industry.
James, one of the things that so kind of surprised and delighted me when I saw your film is that it's obviously about Stephen Hawking, but the character of the wife is hugely important in it. Why did you guys choose that way of telling this story?
Well, that's why I wanted to do the film. I wasn't interested in doing a biography of Stephen Hawking. And the fact that it's not a documentary, which I've done a lot of documentaries over the years, this script could go somewhere where a documentary really couldn't go, as a portrait of a relationship, a marriage. And the perspective of the wife was almost more interesting than Stephen's perspective. She's a very strong woman, a very formidable woman in her own right. And to have that female voice as strongly as Stephen's voice felt like a very interesting way of approaching his story and what he's known for, which is obviously theoretical physics, which is not really a very user-friendly topic for a dramatic film.
Box office gold.
So it felt like, you know, the story was immediately emotional for that reason.
There are a lot of great female roles represented among your films, and it's interesting because as we're talking about them, I realize I'm the only female in the room. And I wonder, is it, as a male director, do you approach directing women any differently than directing men?
I think they're easier to direct, personally.
How come?
They tend to listen and communicate a bit more directly than male actors. This is just my very limited experience. And they tend to contradict you in ways that are more gracious, perhaps. And maybe that's just my weakness. But what do you think?
I mean, I would love to see a sequel called Motherhood. Many people have said that Patricia Arquette's extraordinary.
Yeah, no, it was wonderful to be. I mean, this film is really kind of sort of a portrait of my own mom and our relationship to, you know, that's kind of the basis of it. So I needed someone who reminded me of that same kind of passion and, you know, her process and everything. So yeah, I love it. I've always worked well with women, I think. Growing up with, you know, a strong mom, 2 older sisters, but I don't approach any different. I never thought that question.
And
just an actor they all had, you know, different approaches, different methods. I don't know.
JC, I was just going to ask the dynamic of the relationship between the couple in your film is so fantastic. In a lot of ways, they are really on equal footing through a lot of the story. And was that something you were conscious of as you were writing?
It's written in the sort of gag of the movie is essentially it's structured, you know, like a classic old gangster movie. And so, you know, and Jessica was, you know, it's really the most meaningful relationship I'd ever had with an actress, actually, frankly. You know, I'd worked with Demi Moore for a couple days on my first film, and then my second film only had one actor in it. So so it was an amazing experience, you know, and she brought, there's 2 or 3 lines, going back to what you were saying, there's 2 or 3 lines in the movie, you know, that Jessica put in there that are wonderful, you know, so I think it was a you know, great experience. I find writing, you know, I've yet to sort of write a main female character yet, which I think, you know, I have a daughter and I have sisters, and you know, so it's something that's there, but I obviously am sort of too immature at this point to tap into it.
Now, Richard, when we had Patricia Arquette here, she was saying how she's still kind of sad that the movie is over. Like she was so used to it as a part of just the structure of her life for so many years. Are you used to not having the film as part of your life yet?
We're all still adjusting. Everything about that movie is very different. The readjustment and, you know, I don't know, we're all still, you know, having trouble with the fact that we're not shooting this year. We still think we maybe should get together and keep, I don't know. It's been it's
amazing.
Just something about the process. But it's been wonderful. It was a wonderful way to work for 12 years, but yeah.
Was it crew? But was it the crew continuity?
A lot of the same crew. We had about a large amount of people worked like 10 years or more. You know, it was always our schedules, and then certain people they were on another job. But, you know, so ultimately we had like 400 different people worked on the movie. But yeah, there were some really key department heads who were there the whole time. And they loved it because they saw the kids grow up. So it was like a family reunion, and it didn't even feel like a movie. It felt like just something we were doing, you know, no release date, no distributor, no pressure, just try to keep working on this cool little thing we were getting to do. But yeah, Patricia said she would trade it all in, you know, if it would never come out and we could just keep working on it forever, that would be all of our choice. And I kind of agree. That'd be fine.
Well, that
but we were stuck with the 12 years. You know, it ended when he got out of high school. So.
Well, that brings up an interesting idea of just, even at this point in your career, who do you feel like you're making movies for? Are you making them for yourself? Do you have some idealized audience in mind?
Certainly this one felt like it was, yeah. It kind of depends on the movie sometimes. Certainly you're doing it, make a film you would like to see, or what's challenging you personally, or a story you're obsessed with is really the core of everything. So, but the audience to me is pretty abstract, you know, like you're the audience. That's how I feel. If I think it's funny, I'll just go with that, or, you know, you can't really anticipate what an audience might feel. It's always wonderful when you're sitting there watching your movie with the first time in an audience and you feel like if it does work the way you've intended, it kind of feels, you know, like a wonderful bonus, but it's kind of not what you were thinking. At least I wasn't.
And do you feel like the movie that you've ended up with is a movie you sort of set out to make?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The tone, everything.
It strikes me that 3 of you had real people in your movie who then saw your movie. What is it like to screen your movie for Cheryl Strait, for instance?
Very emotional.
Mm-hmm.
She came in the cutting room, and she saw one of the first versions, and of course she came on the set and she had some emotional moment, and on the trail she became my technical advisor, you know, with some technical stuff about the tent and the backpack, but it's I mean, picture this, you wrote a book about your life, about your demons, about your hope, about your desire to find yourself, and then it becomes a film. It's played by Reese Witherspoon. It becomes some sort of a lot of attention. Then you're on the set. Your daughter is playing little Cheryl. Her daughter is playing little Cheryl. And then you're in the cutting room, and you're seeing a movie about. So I was seated next behind the Avid, and she was on a couch with her husband, and it was they were holding hands, and they had a box of tissues, and it was an amazing emotional moment. And same with Reese. At the end of the first screening, there was a lot of crying, a lot of laughing, and gratitude, expressing gratitude, and not to, you know, to life, you know, not to the director but just to, oh my God, I'm so happy that's how it's turning out. So I feel, and Nick and everyone, and Reese, we feel we had some a moral responsibility, you know, to be respectful of her story, her life, and so that was a relief to see her react in that way.
And James, I mean, you've had 2 very specific people to show the film to. What has that been like?
They're English people of a very different generation from my own, and quite reserved. And I'm dealing with their marriage and the failure of their marriage, essentially. And Eddie had to, on the second day of filming, Stephen Hawking showed up. We're working next door to his college in Cambridge. He comes along, and Eddie has to, on his second day, you know, act in front of Stephen Hawking, which was quite difficult for him, or raise the stakes even further. When we showed the film to Stephen at the end of, we just about finished it. We hadn't finished the sound mix, and it's very hard to discern, you know, what's going on with him. And when it's over, you have to wait about 20 minutes to get his response, because the way in which he communicates is so slow. So then you fill that void with just inane kind of babble of your own, and you're dealing with the smartest man in the world, and you're just saying the most ludicrous and dumb things. You know, you're waiting, and also the tension in that wait is extraordinary. What's he going to say? And he will say it in a very short number of words, and it could ruin your life, you know. And so his proclamation was that it was broadly true, what he'd seen, which I will take as a documentary filmmaker, because you know that often you make films about people And they don't say that even when it's a documentary, when they've had a big part of the storytelling. So that was about as bad as it could be in terms of the anticipation of what could go wrong if he didn't like it. Wow. But thank goodness he did.
Yeah. But now you yourself do not like to watch your own films, as I understand the last time
and that's why this is difficult for me to be here, to be honest. I let them go very quickly. You feel like you have to. It's healthy to let them go once they're done. In your case, probably a very different experience because of the 12 years, because of the communal nature of it. But I think once you've done a film, you just want I never want to see it again. I just see my mistakes, and I've got those clocked already. I've been cutting it for 3 months. I know what they are. And seeing it with an audience one time is very, very useful to understand, as you say, that you feel whether the audience has got with the film or not. And but after that, I will never watch a film again. I want to go and make the next one and move on and take the lessons.
Not even years later, you don't go?
No, I haven't done it so far, no.
Me too, I don't.
It doesn't seem like a healthy.
I feel the same.
I've never wanted to. You see them so often when you're editing.
I've had some pretty fun 10 and even 20-year reunions of cast and stuff that, yeah, I'm kind of...
You made those kind of films, though, like a film like Slacker, what a great thing to go back to.
Yeah, it's because it's a class reunion of all the big ensemble cast. I've had fun with that, but yeah, I would never, like, on my own watch it, but...
That would be kind of sad, wouldn't it?
10 years later. Yeah, no, who does that?
Yeah, really.
But, you know, 10 years later, maybe.
I watched the beginning now. I'm still in the promotion and doing some Q&As. I arrive 5 minutes before the end. I see,
you get to the end and you see what the response is.
But to sit there...
no, it would just be agony, really. And
JC, I'm obsessed. I watch only my own movies. I did, at a desperate time of writing, watch a section of my first film. That I watched the movie again, just
to give you confidence.
Yeah,
yeah, I can see that
totally.
Yeah.
I think also, I know this sounds bizarre, but it was a dialogue thing, and there was no dialogue, and so I had spent 2.5 years on a movie where basically no one talked the entire time. So I, from a writing perspective, had really lost sort of confidence, I think, in probably dialogue and what that was and what a movie like that I made was like.
Dialogues in margin column.
Yeah, and it was a fun, for me, it was like a life-changing, that script changed my entire life, you know, so I think it was definitely it was to remind myself that you know, at one point wrote some good dialogue and you could again someday.
Well, I think that's a wrap, gentlemen. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for your patience.
Thank you.